Looking back, I realized that the first alarm bells went off long before I learned the truth. But when you trust people, you don't want to overlook the obvious. You drive away bad thoughts by explaining to yourself that you're just tired, that you're imagining things. I always thought I knew my wife better than anyone, but as it turned out, I was a complete fool. At first, it was nothing. She started spending more time on her phone. We never had any secrets from each other. If someone left their phone on the table, the other could easily pick it up to answer a message or look at something. But a few months ago, that changed. Now her phone was always with her. She even carried it with her to the bathroom. One day we were sitting on the couch and her phone lit up with a message. I automatically reached out to hand it to her, but she literally snatched it out of my hands. She laughed nervously and said, "Oh, sorry, it's a habit." This phrase was supposed to calm me down, but instead something inside me clenched. It was so strange. Do we really not trust each other anymore? But the worst was yet to come. She started leaving the house more often in the evening. We used to be the kind of people who did everything together. We went to dinners, went for walks in the evenings, just enjoyed each other's company. And now everything has changed. She was always finding things to do. "I'm going to meet my friends," she would say, quickly getting ready. I offered to go along, but she refused. "Oh, you'll be bored, you don't know them." They sounded like standard excuses, but I believed them less and less each time. I didn't know what to think. She would come home late, a little relaxed, with a subtle smile on her lips. It was not like after a normal evening with her friends. One day she came home and fell tiredly on the bed. I hugged her, and then I felt it, the smell. I knew this smell very well, a woody, slightly pungent scent. It was my brother's perfume. I gave him this perfume for Christmas. It was like being doused with ice water. At first I told myself it was an accident. Maybe she was just passing by, maybe she hugged him when she met him. But something inside me was already screaming that none of this was true. From that moment on, I started to notice more details. She stopped calling me those gentle nicknames she was used to. Our conversations became short and mechanical. She no longer laughed at my jokes, although she used to laugh for hours, but the worst thing was that I no longer felt her near me, even when she was sitting right in front of me. I didn't have proof yet, but I already knew the truth. All that was left was to prove it. I could not afford to remain in the dark. Suspicions were eating me up inside, forcing me to analyze her every look, every movement, every word. She always had her phone with her, but when she thought I didn't see it, she would often check the messages and then quickly put it away. She started putting on more makeup before her meetings with friends, and every time she came home she was too cheerful or, on the contrary, tense. My mind was flitting between two thoughts. Was I just winding myself up, or was something terrible really happening? I knew I couldn't act on impulse. If I was wrong, it would destroy our marriage for no good reason. But if I was right, I just couldn't imagine the consequences. At first, I decided to observe. I memorized the times she left and returned, her excuses, her calls. Everything seemed suspiciously coordinated. She had meetings with friends on the same days every week. And you know what else is interesting? My brother was also unavailable on the same days. I started paying attention to the little things. Her phone was always on silent mode, and when it did vibrate, she would grab it faster than usual. One day I asked her why she was suddenly so cautious, and she replied, "It's just a lot of work. I don't want constant calls to distract us when we're together." It sounded logical, right? But then why was her phone vibrating at 2 in the morning when she thought I was asleep? I couldn't ask her directly. She would have found an explanation, would have turned it around as if I was the one behaving inappropriately. So I decided to go the other way. I started collecting evidence. The first thing I did was hack into her phone. She changed the password a few months ago, although we always shared codes before. But I noticed that her fingers were moving in a certain pattern, and one day, when she didn't notice, I tried to repeat her movements on my phone. It stuck in my mind. When she went to take a shower, I took her phone, entered this code, and it worked. What I saw made my heart beat faster. Text messages. A pile of text messages. "You are so gentle." If he knew, he would go crazy. "I think about you even when I'm around him. I can't hide anymore." And then a photo of her and him together in an embrace. She was wearing the same clothes she had come home in after the last meeting with her friends. I almost threw up. I closed the phone, put it back and went to the bathroom. I needed to breathe in, breathe out, pull myself together. I could have just walked out of the room and confronted her right away. But that would have been too easy for her. She could have said that it was not what you think or made an excuse. She had to realize that I knew. That I was not an idiot, so I decided that I would play a prank on her. The next time she told me she was going to meet her friends, I just smiled and answered, "Okay, sweetheart. Have fun." But this time I didn't stay home. I followed her. I wanted to see her lover. I imagined someone random, a man in an expensive suit, maybe a work colleague or some old friend she had never told me about. But I was not prepared for who I would see. The door to room 214 opened, and I froze. He was standing in the hallway, my younger brother. It was like I was hit in the chest. My heart skipped a beat and then pounded so hard that it was echoing in my ears. I looked at him and couldn't believe it. He looked nervous, his hand was still on the door handle, as if he was hesitating to enter. And then I saw her. My wife came out from behind him, barefoot, wearing the dress I had given her for our anniversary. They didn't even hide the fact that it was a meeting of two lovers. My thoughts were in chaos. This was not just a random man. This was my brother. The person I trusted, with whom I grew up, with whom I shared everything. The memories of our childhood. Our evenings playing video games together, our conversations about the future, all of it shattered in an instant. He was the first to realize that he had seen me. His eyes widened in shock. He didn't say a word, but I could see his face turning pale. My wife also finally realized what had happened. She put her hand over her mouth like in a cheap melodrama and took a step back. I looked at the phone in my hand. The recording was going on. Whether I liked it or not, I had proof. But right now, that was the least of my worries. I took a step forward. Seriously? My question hung in the air. I didn't shout, threaten, or break furniture, as they show in movies. My voice was quiet. Almost dead. My brother finally opened his mouth as if he was going to say something, but I already knew the words. "It's not what you think. I can explain. It just happened." "No," I said coldly, "you don't need an explanation." My wife stepped forward, her face wet with tears. "Please, let me talk." I raised my hand, silencing her. "For how long?" She twitched as if it were a painful question. My brother lowered his head, as if this could hide his guilt. 6 months. She answered quietly. I nodded. 6 months of lies. 6 months of thinking we were fine. I slowly pressed the button on my phone, stopping the recording. "You two should think about how you're going to live with this," I said, "because I'm not going to live with it." I turned and walked away, leaving them in that room. But I knew that this moment would stay with me forever. I walked down the hotel corridor, but every step was difficult. There was a continuous buzz in my head, as if I had just been hit by a truck, but my body hadn't realized it yet. I knew there was no turning back. What I had just seen was impossible to forget or forgive, but, damn it, it was my brother. I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen. The video was still open. My sense of reality blurred, as if I were watching some bad scene from a movie and not my own life. My fingers gripped the phone tighter. I had to decide what to do next. I could just disappear without saying a word to anyone. Go home, pack my things, and slip out of her life without scandal. But it would have been too easy for them. They had to realize that betrayal has consequences. Suddenly I heard a voice behind me, "Please talk to me." I stopped, but did not turn around. Her voice was weak, pleading. She ran barefoot into the corridor after me, and I could imagine what she looked like, disheveled, with eyes red from tears. "What are we going to talk about?" My voice was calm. Even distant. I didn't want this to happen, she sobbed, but it did. She was silent. "Why?" I asked, turning my head to look at her. I did not expect an honest answer. But there it was. I felt lonely. She looked at the floor. "You're at work all the time, you come home tired, we hardly ever talk." And he was there. I clenched my teeth. It was even worse than I had imagined. She didn't deny it, didn't make excuses, didn't blame me directly, but the point was clear: it was my fault. "You could have talked to me," I shook my head slowly, "but you chose to betray me." She wiped her tears away with trembling fingers. "I know. I made a mistake." "No," I took a deep breath. "A mistake is when you accidentally left your keys in the car. It was your choice." I wanted to say something else, but then my brother came out of the room. He looked no less miserable, tousled hair, eyes full of fear. "Brother." His voice was trembling. "Listen, please." I nodded, allowing him to speak. "It wasn't planned. We didn't want you to find out like this." I laughed. "Honestly, sincerely, without anger, you didn't want me to find out? Is that all you care about?" He turned even paler. I love her." These words caused an unexpected reaction in me. I suddenly felt relieved. It put everything in its place. "Then you both deserve each other." I shrugged. I was no longer going to stand here and listen to excuses. They made their choice, and I made mine. I left the hotel and did what I had to do. I sent the video to my parents. The next morning, I woke up to my phone vibrating. Messages poured in one after another. My parents. My sister. Friends. I already knew what was coming. After I sent the video to my parents, I turned off my phone and went to bed. For the first time in a long time, I didn't care what happened next. But now reality was catching up with me. I reached for my phone and opened the first message from my mom. "Tell me this is a joke. Please." The next one was from my father. "Come over. We need to talk." I didn't want to go. I didn't want to relive that moment. I didn't want to listen to excuses or, even worse, attempts to fix everything. But these were my parents. When I arrived at their house, the atmosphere was tense, like before a storm. My mom was sitting on the couch, her eyes red with tears. My father was standing by the window, looking at nothing. "Why didn't you just come to us and send us this?" My father asked, not even turning to me. "Because I wanted you to see the truth," I answered, sitting down on a chair. Mom sobbed and wiped her tears. "This is your brother." Her voice was trembling. I corrected her. Silence. Long, heavy silence, he was already here, my father finally said. I looked up, and, my father sighed heavily. He said he was sorry. That he didn't want it to happen this way. That it was a mistake. I stood up abruptly. A mistake? It's not a mistake. It's a choice. He's your brother. Mom said sharply. You have to talk. I felt anger boiling inside me. We have already talked. He made his choice. I made mine. That doesn't mean you have to cut him out of your life, she insisted. I laughed, but there was no joy in it. Would you say the same thing if your father had cheated on you with your sister? My mother hesitated, and my father turned to me with a heavy look. It's not the same. It is exactly the same. I looked at them both. Do you want to keep the illusion of a happy family? Fine. But without me. I turned around and walked to the door. Where are you going? My mom's voice sounded desperate. To live my life, I answered without even turning around. I walked out the door, knowing that everything had changed forever. The next day, my phone was ringing off the hook. My brother. My wife. Even a few mutual friends who probably already knew everything. I ignored them all, but then I received a call I didn't expect. Hello, said the voice on the other end of the line. I recognized him immediately. It was Tom, my best friend from high school. We hadn't talked much lately, but he was always the one who understood me without words. Hi, I replied dryly. I saw the video, he said after a short pause. It's brutal. I took a deep breath. Yeah, it was, dude. Are you okay? It was the first normal question someone had asked me in the last 2 days. Not what are you going to do now? Not why did you do something so radical? But just, how am I? I didn't know what to say. It seems to be okay, I said after a pause, but it's not. I see, he nodded, although I couldn't see it. Listen, I was thinking. Maybe you need to get away for a while. You know, get your mind off things, distraction. I laughed bitterly. Tom, my life just fell apart, that's why, he said calmly. Let's do something to help you blow off some steam. I didn't know what he meant, but I agreed. I was angry. Devastated. And, to be honest, I needed something to make me feel alive. We met at a bar. It was the place where we used to hang out after work, but now I perceived it completely differently. It seemed as if I was a stranger here. Tom put a glass of whiskey in front of me. To freedom, he winked. I took a drink. The alcohol burned my throat, but it was exactly what I needed. And now, revenge, Tom said mysteriously. I looked at him in surprise. What? Not literal. He held up his hands. But you have to let them know that you won't just go into the shadows and keep quiet. I looked at him silently as he took out his phone. I've already done some work, he smiled. Remember that lawyer I know who helped me with that contract? He says you have every right to ask for a divorce without division of property. Given the circumstances, I thought about it, and then, Tom continued, I did some Googling. The hotel where they were meeting. You know who else goes there often? His co-workers. You mean, if any of them found out? He shrugged. I wasn't sure if I wanted to, but then I remembered their faces. How my brother stood there, guilty but not truly sorry. How she tried to blame me for what she had done. You're right, I said. The next morning, her boss received an anonymous letter. The reckoning was not long in coming. I didn't know how her boss would react to the letter, but the result exceeded my expectations. The company she worked for had a strict corporate code. Any scandal or behavior that could cast a shadow on the company's reputation was taken seriously. And when it came to relationships with the wives or husbands of colleagues, the situation became even more complicated. A week later, I received a call from a mutual acquaintance. Have you heard? What did she say? She quit her job. fired or quit, they say it was voluntary. But everyone understands that she was simply forced to leave. I didn't feel any joy. Just emptiness. Then it was my brother's turn. It turned out that several of his colleagues had also learned about the video. Either through gossip or through the same anonymous person who sent the letter to his bosses. In any case, he also got into trouble. One evening he called me himself. "Please, talk to me." His voice was quiet, exhausted. "We have nothing more to talk about. This has gone too far. It went where you brought it." I didn't let him finish. He was silent. I didn't either. "I've lost everything," he finally whispered. "Welcome to the club," I replied and hung up. The last thing I heard from them both was even funny. 3 months after all this happened, she tried to get back to him. She needed support because she had lost her job, her reputation, and her stability. But her brother, as it turned out, was not going to be her savior. He was just using her, the same friend told me, and when he realized that she was no longer useful to him, he dumped her. Karma. I didn't have to do anything else. They ruined their lives on their own. Time passed. I didn't count the days, I just moved forward, even if it seemed mechanical. At first I felt as if I was in a void. The house seemed alien, even the air was different. The silence that used to bring me peace only emphasized how much I was alone. Some things still reminded me of the past: her cup on the shelf, her forgotten blouse on the back of the chair, the familiar smell in the closet. I tried to get rid of everything that reminded me of her, but memories are not just things, they can't be thrown in the trash. Every morning I woke up with a strange feeling, as if it was just a long nightmare that was about to end. But as soon as I looked in the mirror, I saw the truth in my eyes. It had happened. It was real. After the first shock came anger. Pure, cold, ruthless anger. I had been imagining this scenario for months, thinking that if this happened, would leave immediately without looking back. But in reality, betrayal is like a poison that works gradually. It not only breaks trust, but also makes you doubt yourself. I was angry not only at them, but also at myself. How could I not notice? How did I let this happen? I started working harder than ever. I immersed myself in business so that I wouldn't be alone with my thoughts. But at night, the past came back. I remembered every conversation, every moment that now seemed suspicious. I analyzed their words, searched for hidden meanings, and analyzed their expressions. It was painful. But then I realized that I didn't need to do this. I don't owe them anything anymore. One evening I deleted everything: her number, messages, photos. I threw away the things she had left behind. It was a symbolic gesture, but it made me realize the main thing. From that moment on, she was no longer in my life. One day I realized that I no longer thought about them every second. That I could live a day without remembering the betrayal. It didn't mean that the pain was gone, but it no longer controlled me. I started to change. The gym became a place where I got rid of the accumulated anger. I wasn't just pumping my muscles, I was building a new version of myself. Not for someone else, not for revenge, but for myself. I started traveling. At first, it was just weekend trips, other cities, new places. I wasn't looking for adventure, I wasn't trying to escape, I just wanted to find myself again. And then, one night, I met her. It wasn't like a Hollywood movie, with no lightning bolts or dramatic moments. She was just there. A girl who laughed sincerely, who didn't hide her phone, who didn't avoid direct looks. We talked for hours. At first, I held back, afraid that I would feel the same fear of trust again. But she was different. There was no falsity in her words. One day she asked me, "Why do you react so strangely when I tell you something?" I thought about it, because you are honest, she smiled, and at that moment I realized, trust is not a gift. It is a privilege. It has to be earned, and this time I was ready to try again, so, that was my story. I hope it made you think that true trust is the most valuable thing in any relationship. If you want to share your thoughts or experiences, please write in the comments. I'm always happy to hear from you. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories. Take care and remember that honesty and openness are the most important things. See you soon.